You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch UK Radio.
Hello everybody, how are you? I hope everyone's well and it's very nearly Christmas! Hope you've all got everything organised if you're someone who celebrates the Christmas season. If not, I do apologise because we're probably going to be talking Christmas quite a bit this week on Parasearch Radio. Who listened to my show with Katrina Weidman last week? If you didn't hear it or you missed it, don't worry. You can go and catch it on Spreaker and on YouTube. But she has posted it out and said how much she enjoyed it, and we now have to call her the Lady of the Lockdown. This is going to be a new rule that we're going to be passing in the paranormal world, that our Katrina now needs to be known as the Lady of the Lockdown. So, hi Richard, hi Corinne, glad you could join us. So what are we going to be talking about? Well, this is the last Haunted Histories of 2019, people. Yep, it will be hitting 2020 for the next episode, although this isn't probably the last you'll hear from me, unless this cold that I think I'm brewing does hit with a vengeance. I will be on the live show on Friday night, which is kind of our, I suppose, Parasearch Christmas party that we do in front of you guys, you lucky people. And you probably saw me on the live on Monday, you unlucky people. Although I had washed and put makeup on, so you know, you do feel honoured. But what have I been up to? Well, I've just finished the first draft of my new book, so that's going off, it's going to be proofread and going off editing and all that kind of thing. And I did a presentation to the Year 5s at my son's school last week on Henry VIII. Yeah, that was interesting. Some of the questions they asked were... Kids never fail to amaze me, it must be said. I've also finished reading Andy Saw's book, 72 Minutes, or 72 Minutes in the Woods, as it's officially called, and he wouldn't answer any questions for me until I'd finished it. He's such hard work, that one, but it's worth reading. But talking about books, and talking about writing, and talking about the feeling you get when you finish a manuscript, my next guest knows all about that, because it is the wonderful horror from Hull himself, Mr. Mike Covell. How you doing, Mike?
I'm alright, thank you.
Good. Now, we've just been talking about this off air, haven't we? And you were explaining to me why the phone connections from Hull are so bad. Yeah,
we have our own communications network in Hull. We're not like the rest of the country. We have Kingston Communications, or KCOM as it's called, and it's a really old company, and they provide our phone and broadband and all that kind of stuff. So we do have a few problems and a few issues and whatnot with it.
Yeah, so if anyone thinks it sounds like Mike's talking through like sort of cotton wool or something, it's actually his beard that's causing part of the problems, which, you know, apparently he got called a homeless person the other day. So apparently it's getting shaved off, is it, once it warms up a bit? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, talking about finishing manuscripts and finishing books, you do know how I feel. The fact that my second book, I've finished the manuscript. It's now going to be going off for editing and everything. I said to someone, it feels like I'm sending my child into the world a bit when that happens. How would you describe it when you first finish writing a piece and it gets sent off for everyone to assess it almost?
It's the same. It's the same sort of feeling. There's a little bit of excitement. There's a little bit of pride. You get nervous because you don't know what people are going to think. And I'm quite sort of... I'll finish a book and then read it and then reread it and I'll often self-edit before I send it off to the publisher. So I'm my own worst critic. I'll go through it and think that's not right. I don't want that there. I'm going to move that. When you finally do send it, when you click that button, you know, it's a big thing. You know, it's your baby. You know, you're sending that out there, and you hope people will enjoy it and appreciate it, and read it and buy it and support your work and stuff.
Yeah.
So it is a big, you know, it is a big thing.
It is. It is. I'm quite nervous about this one because it is my second one, and it's like, do those nerves? I mean, how many books have you written now?
Well, I've published 27, but I've actually finished writing about 40. I'm just waiting for my publisher to catch up.
And does that feeling of nerves sending your child into the ether ever go?
No.
Oh hell.
Never. And I mean, it's a weird feeling as well when you're lecturing and people walk up to you with your book.
Yeah.
You know, you're often wondering, have they got something nice to say, or are they going to be nasty?
Yes.
I'm luckily most people are lovely. You know, and it's great. It's a great feeling when you're getting called to sign books at places and stuff like that. And at this time of the year, when people are buying other people Christmas presents, I get a lot of people calling me in Hull and saying, "We've got some of your books. Can you pop round and sign them?" So this time of the year, I'm quite busy backwards and forwards. I remember one year actually, a lady called me on Christmas Eve and said, and it was about tea time Christmas Eve, and she said, "Can you sign a couple of my books? I've just got them for my husband, and I'd love them if you could sign them." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." And I went to meet her, and she was so grateful. She gave me a big box of chocolate biscuits to say thank you. And so that was lovely. And this week I've been out and about signing books for people for Christmas, and in the past I've had people in Hull buy my books and bring them to me to sign, and then they've sent them off to places like Australia and New Zealand and America and all sorts. So that's wonderful when people send you videos on Christmas Day, and it's a video of them opening your book.
Yeah.
And it's quite real, you know, it's at the other side of the world, but they're sat there enjoying your book, so that's nice as well.
I haven't had that yet, but then again, I'm sort of about 38 books off where you are, but I have had photos sent when it's sort of somebody reading it in Australia or somebody reading it in America or somebody reading it in Canada, and I do have to pinch myself and think, wow, okay, I can't quite get over this. But I know what you mean about you don't know if someone's going to say something nice to you or nasty, because I'd say 99% of people have said nice stuff to me, and for me, I don't know about yourself, Mike, but for me the biggest compliment is when someone asks me a question about something, like they want a bit more information than what, say, I just put in the book, and they want to say, well, how did you find out about that, and what made you write about that rather than this? Or, because to me, A, that shows they've read it, and B, I think we should ask questions of people. We should ask the whys and the like dig in a bit more, because that's how we learn.
Yeah, it's a wonderful feeling, you know. I remember there was a lady that came with one of my books, and she basically said, "There's a chapter in your book," and I remember my dad talking about it, and my dad passed away, and it brought back a lot of wonderful memories of conversations that I had with my dad. You know, and just little things like that, you know, or people saying, well, this particular chapter reminded me of this thing, or this was a story that my parents had talked about, my grandparents had talked about, and I never knew if it's true or not, but you've actually backed it up with sources and shown that not only is it true, but it was reported in the press and there's files in the archive, you know, stuff like that. That's wonderful. Really, really nice.
Yeah, no, it means a lot to me, and I mean, I have had a bad review, but then again, one out of most of them being pretty good, I'm not that concerned about. But it's the other thing with me that I always say, and I'm sure you're the same, is if I do make a mistake, tell me. Please tell me, because I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, and we do get things wrong occasionally. I think mine was put in the wrong county for somewhere, and it was just one of those brain fart moments. I put the wrong county in, and no, it wasn't picked up. But I'm quite I'm quite excited. This one's been it's about 10 months I think it's taken me to do it, with the sort of working full time and researching it and writing it, and so it is exciting. I can't believe I'm always going to feel like I'm sending a child out into the wilds every time I launch one.
I remember one of my books was a collection of newspaper reports, and it mentions this on the front cover, it mentions it on the back cover, it mentions it in the introduction, and one of the reviews I got was, well, it's essentially just a collection of newspaper reports. And that was like, how can you come back from that? Like, that is the book. That's what I set out to do. And it was just like, I don't understand the argument. This was a Jack the Ripper book. There's 7 or 8 Jack the Ripper books out there that are essentially just collections of newspaper reports.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write one about Hull because Hull had correspondence in London at the time covering the Parnell Commission.
Yeah.
So we were getting stuff that wasn't published anywhere else. We was getting information that wasn't appearing in other newspapers. So this was brand new, fresh information that had never been published before. And it was, so I'd made this readily available in a book, and people were kind of saying, well, it is just a collection of newspaper reports. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of following what other people, and it was bizarre, And then I had, I get a lot of, where I am in Hull, there's a lot of green-eyed monsters, and I was getting attacked by certain individuals that were just leaving 1-star reviews, and I knew who they were, and I had a word with Amazon, and I had a word with my publisher, and we knew who they were, and it was just idiots really trying to spoil it. But at the end of the day, this is like a full-time job, so it was crazy. And on top of that, as well as a writer, I get approached by magazines and newspapers, and the funniest one, the funniest kind of review, I was getting asked to write a weekly article for the Hull Daily Mail. I was working for them as a freelancer, and I still work for them now. And they approached me, and every week I would write something new, and every week it would get published in a 2-page spread. And after about 4 or 5 weeks, someone wrote a comment, and it said, "For God's sake, this man is always in the paper. It's my job. I get paid to do it, It's like me turning up at their workplace and saying, are you back again? So...
Yeah, jealousy, I don't get it. I mean, you and I support each other's work quite a bit, and you said some lovely comments about me recently on Facebook, which I'm still blushing over. And I think there is too much. We if we all come together. I mean, one of the things I was chatting to someone who wants to write a book, and she said, "Where do I start?" And I said, "Start with an idea and go from there." I said, there are so many authors out there that will help you. I said, myself. I said, Mike Covell, Richard Estep, some ones I know in America like Jamie Rubio. There's a few others that I've got to know, sort of having written now myself. And I said, all of us want to see more authors coming on. All of us want to see more people writing, because there's always room for more. And whilst I won't give all my work to someone for free, if someone says to me, well, if you were in the records office and you were looking for something on this, where would you start? I have no problem giving people, like you and I have had discussions about this, haven't we, about where to look, what records to look into, what almost searches to put in. And it's because the more you do it, the more you learn more stuff that you can then help the other person, and it's kind of paying it forward. So I don't get why people get so sort of, that's my work, it's my work, I'm the one who's found the information out, therefore I'm not going to explain to you how to find it out, because that person you're not explaining it to one day will learn how to, and you might need them to help you over a hurdle. And that's the way, I know that's the way you and I have worked over the last couple of years. I mean, you're still a bit more the teacher, but there's no need to feel it's a competition. No.
No. And for me, I mean, I've helped other people in the past, and they've returned it. There's maybe times when they want research done in up north, and I'll go and do the research for them. But then there'll be times when I want research done in, say, London, and they'll go and do that. I remember I was researching a book on a case about a gentleman in Hull who killed 3 women. And the file was in the National Archives, and I called the National Archives up, and they said, if you want me to photograph or scan the file, it will cost you around about £1,000.
Yeah.
And I was shocked. And I rang a friend of mine who was a researcher, and she said to me, I'll go and do it for free. So, you know, and I work like that with a lot of people, a lot. And it's always nice as well. A lot of the authors that I work with will often mention me in the acknowledgements, which is always lovely. And in some cases, send me a copy of the book as well and sign it. It's always nice. I've got a big collection of books from authors that are all signed and, you know, that were sent to me as a gift. And it's great. You know,
well, I think I actually mentioned you in the... yeah, I did. I'm just checking. Yes, I mentioned you in the thanks in my book.
Yeah, I remember recently I read The Black Monk by Richard Easter.
Yeah.
And he mentioned me in his book as well.
Yeah.
Mr. Covell.
Yeah, That was funny. That was so funny. That was funny.
Yeah.
I love Richard. He's another one who's helped me a lot. So I just think it's we don't have to be in competition. We can help each other. And yeah, I've got to get down to the National Archives at some point, but it's the wrong side of London for me. It's like a 2-hour trip across around London, so it's not one that I could just pop down and do. But I've got a big long list of things I need to get down there for at some point, because Richard put me in touch with someone in America who wanted something looking into in the UK, and I don't mind. It's like a drug to me anyway. I love doing it. I love finding out stuff, but it's all about helping each other. I think that's what's good. But let's just say your chosen field. I mean, you do. You know, we've talked about the paranormal before. We've talked about Jack the Ripper before. We've talked about World War II and Hull before. This is a bit of a different one we're going to be talking about. Now, the reason I sort of thought that, apart from the fact it's nice and Christmassy to talk about murders, you know, put that sort of the can't think what the word is now, but the complete opposite of tinsel and niceness and Christmas carols. Let's talk about killings. And you are a bit of a guru, shall we say, on little known murders in Hull, especially in the 19th century. Would that be correct in saying?
Yeah, I mean, basically what I do is I trawl the archives for true crime cases, not just murders, but all sorts of true crime cases. But it's the murders that really speak to me, because in a lot of them, they're forgotten. In a lot of them, you know, the names of the victims are no longer spoken, and it's a shame. You know, these stories need to be remembered, and we need to talk about things like this, and we can learn from them. And in the case of, in some of these, the people have written about them in the past, but they've got the basic elements of the story wrong, or you know, name spelt wrong, locations is spelt wrong, you know, and what will happen is people will read that, and then they will go and write their own version and just regurgitate the same old bit, and then someone else will read that and regurgitate, and so on and so forth, and the original history gets lost.
It's like Chinese whispers.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I found that happens a lot in Hull. We have kind of a weird history where there's a lot of, you know, my granny said this, you know, my granny said that, and when you go and research it, because you find it fascinating, you find that it's not actually the case, you know, and then, you know, and then I bring out a book about it, and people complain because I've dared to tell the truth, you know, and it's a lot of these cases that I go and research. There are stories that need to be told about people that don't have a voice, and I'm trying to give these people a voice, you know, so they're remembered. And so their story can be told for future generations without having to go through all this false history.
Well, let's start with the first one then. And I'll say that the reason that we were going to talk about murder is because you told me that you were going to be on, is it Sky's Crime channel?
Yes. December 22nd, I will be on, I think it's either 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And it's a true crime show about murders and stuff like that. I'll be on that.
But we weren't going to talk about that specific murder case. Firstly, because it's actually quite recent, And secondly, you can't really talk too much about it until after the program has been on.
Yeah.
But, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, we've got quite a few to choose from, and also ones that you've written a lot about. So the first one I was going to look at was and I don't know if I'm going to get my tongue around this, the Marfleet murder mystery with Mary Jane Langley.
That's right.
Now, if we get through all three of the murders I'm going to be talking about in the next 40 minutes, we're going to have two young women and a young lad. And the young lad is the one that I will say to anyone listening, if you are of a nervous disposition, this might make you. The young lad one will. It upset me to read about it. I just want to give that warning out. If there are any children listening to this show whose parents let them listen, they may not want to listen to these bits. That's all I will say. I know we have an adult content warning on these shows anyway, but I'm stressing this is quite horrible what happened. But I think all their stories need to be told, because people need to know about these people. And one of the things that I always find, and I actually agree with the historian Hallie Rubinold about this, is that everyone remembers the killers, but not everyone remembers the victims. So when you look at someone like Jack the Ripper, how many people, I mean, I know you and I can, Mike, but how many people can genuinely name the victims? Most people know his name and stuff to do with him, even though we don't know who he was, but not many of them can name all the victims or their backgrounds or what happened to them. And I always think that's a shame, and it seems to be the way with, I mean, whether you're looking at the Moors murderers, whether you're looking at the Yorkshire Ripper, it's always the murderer who gets the attention as opposed to the victims. And what I like about when you write about these, Mike, is you pull that round the other way. You like to give the victims the attention, which I think is as it should be. Yeah. So this was a story of a young woman. She was 18, I believe, Mary Jane Langley.
Yep, it's a young girl.
Yeah, and you take it from here, Mike. You tell us the background to Mary Jane.
Well, basically, she and her family lived in a farm on the outskirts of Hull, on a long, lonely lane known as Neat Marsh Road, or affectionately known as Preston Long Lane, because it was a long lane. Mm-hmm. She'd basically left her family. Her mum and dad had gone to Sheffield to pay rent on the farm. Mm-hmm. While mum and dad was away, Mary Jane decided to leave Hull. Leave Preston and go to Hull. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that she was going to have a photograph taken.
How close is Preston to Hull then? What's the sort of...
you're looking at about 3 miles.
Right, okay.
It's not far. I mean, for her it was a short walk and a tram ride, and that was it.
Right.
You could get a train either way. So she walked the short distance to get the tram. She got on the tram and travelled into Hull. She had a photograph taken at the Mr. Edmunds photography shop, which is based in the Anderson Funeral Parlour building. Mm-hmm. And she then left. She was seen walking down Holden's Road, and she was seen at the train station. She was seen getting on the train. She was seen getting off the train. She was seen walking across the field. She even went to a local farm for a glass of milk. And when she left the farm, she was never seen alive again. And basically, her parents got home that night, asking where she was. The brothers said that she'd gone out to have a photograph taken, and she had a boyfriend. So they believed maybe she'd gone to see the boyfriend, and they also had family in Hull, so they thought maybe she'd gone to stay with the family. So they weren't too worried. The following morning, the father started making inquiries. So he'd gone to see the boyfriend, and the boyfriend said, "I've not seen her." He went to the family, and the family turned around and said, "We've not seen her." So then he started to worry. But he went home, and that night he had a nightmare about he'd seen a dog in this nightmare, and the dog had gone into the ditch. And the following morning, he decided to go to the police. He was concerned about this. And on the way there, he passed the ditch, it's about 50 yards away from the house. And he found their body at the bottom of the ditch, and she'd had her throat cut. She'd had a body with something underneath what they call a hole stock. It's like a little bridge over a drain.
Right.
And so he contacted the police, he contacted the local doctor who came and examined her. And it at the time, it was just published locally. It was published in the Hull Daily Mail initially. But it was one of those stories that, because of the ferociousness of the cuts on her neck, it just blew up in the press. It was covered hundreds of newspapers around the UK.
Yeah.
It was a massive story. And it was one of those stories that had so many twists and turns in it. It was like it was like a fictional book. It was strange. Initially, the whole police got involved with the East Riding police. At that time, it was kind of on the border between Hull and the East Riding, so both police forces got together.
Mm-hmm.
And what it should have been a joining of two police forces to better this investigation. It turned into an episode of the Keystone Cops. It was just they made so many mistakes. A gentleman was arrested called John Renard, and when he was arrested, they found evidence of blood on his trousers. So they arrested him, and they actually arrested his dog, which is just bizarre. They sent him to the Central Police Station, and without charge, they put him and his dog in Hull Prison. So, and this was while the investigation was ongoing. It was unheard of to do that, and they even dressed him in prison outfits, and there was a bit of an uproar.
And this was August 1891?
This is August, yeah. This is while before the trial even started, people were kicking off and saying you're treating him like a guilty man.
Do you think some of the fear of this, I mean, the way everyone sort of jumped on it the way they did, I mean, it was 3 years after the Ripper murders, the Jack the Ripper murders, 3 years. That was 1880. Was it 1888, Jack the Ripper? My mind's just gone totally blank. It was 88, wasn't it? So you've got 3 years after the Jack the Ripper murders. You've got a young woman who's had her throat cut, and not just sliced. I mean, I read an account that said that you could get a fist in the cut. So it was, and it's not as easy as people think to cut someone's throat. It's not just a straight across. There is actually a technique to it. That sounds like I've studied this, but you know what I mean. Do you think the reason it took off in the press was because people were still reeling about what had happened in London 3 years previously? Yeah,
I do. I believe that played a big part in it. You see, what was strange about Hull, because Hull was a port very much like London. There was stories in 1888 in Hull that Jack the Ripper was on his way to Hull. I can't remember the date now. I think it was about August 6th, 1888, August 5th, 1888. A letter was sent to Hull. Sorry, no, it wasn't. October the 5th, 1888, a letter was sent to Hull, and it said Jack the Ripper was in Hull.
Right.
And it was published in one of the Hull newspapers. So that there was a lot of stories about Hull and Jack the Ripper. There were Ripper scares. There was a number of letters mentioned, the town and stuff like that. So I do believe that played a big part in it. The fact that when you do look at Hull during this period, this kind of murder is quite rare.
But they got a clairvoyant involved.
They did, yeah. I mean, basically what happened was, when they got these two police forces together, one of the things they did was they went to the site of the body several days after the murder, and by this time it had become kind of a gruesome tourist attraction. People were coming from all over the place of Europe. There was thousands of footprints in the hole, and the police went and measured one of the footprints with a stick. So when this went to the courts, and the courts turned around and said, what evidence have you got? They said, well, first of all, we've got this stick. And of course everybody laughed. The city analyst and the borough analyst was mortified. He said, why did you not use a ruler? Why did you not take a photograph? Why is it? And he said, well, it was the only thing to hand. And then, they pointed out that thousands of people had walked through it, so there's evidence that it was missing. So that got thrown out. And then they said, what about the bloodstains on the trousers? Well, it just so happened that John Renard had been suffering from kind of sores on his legs. And when he hiked, his trousers rubbed against his legs.
Right.
His legs were... So the blood marks on the trousers matched the blood on his legs. But also, the trousers were inside out, so they matched perfectly with his legs. So the case against Renard just fell apart, you know, and that was a shambles. So to try and save face, the police pulled in a gentleman called Reverend Locke, and Reverend Locke was a Swedenborgian reverend who was also a psychic, and he came forward and said that I've got evidence, psychic evidence, that Mary Jane had visited several shops when she came into Hull. She'd spoke to the staff, and I've also got evidence that the killer had basically told someone what he'd done, and they were potentially a witness. So the police followed this up, and the first thing is went to the shop in question, which was called Edwin Davis, and the staff turned around and said that the day that Mary Jane came into Hull was a bank holiday weekend, and we was closed, so there was no way she could have gone in the shop and spoke to anybody. So that part of it was debunked. And then when they pulled up Mr. Locke and said, who did the killer speak to, he turned around and said he expressed his guilt to a horse. I mean, how the bloody hell do you interview an horse? So it was just a laugh. It was just like, you know, people were kind of, what the hell is going on? You know, it was just shocking.
It's farcical, yeah.
It was, yeah. It was just. So the investigation never went anywhere, and it was deemed a cold case. It was classed as unsolved, and Mary Jane never got the kind of justice that she deserved. It wasn't until 1892 that things started happening. Things started basically falling into place because of two things. One of those was a newspaper report that was published in Yorkshire, and it basically said that someone called Williams was linked to the murder.
Right.
Now, Williams was a nickname. It was one of the pseudonyms that was being used by Frederick Bailey Deeming.
We know all about Frederick Deeming.
Yeah. So that was quite interesting. But they never followed it up. At that time, Deeming was in Australia. He was under a charge of murder for his wife and his third wife in Australia. So that was never followed up. They never kind of looked at that case. Now, when Mary Jane was murdered, she had on an Albert guard, which is like a chain that goes from your outfit to your watch. She was missing a silver watch, and she was missing a purse. When Deeming was arrested, and these documents are available online, they're in the Australian National Archives. When Deeming was arrested, the police wrote out a very long list. It's about 3 pages long of items that were found when Deeming was arrested in Australia. And on that list is an Albert watch, an Albert guard. Another item on the list is a silver watch, and another item on the list is a pair.
So he took trophies.
And this was common, you know. If you look through the other murders he committed, he cut all the throats of his first wife and 3 of his children. He cut the throats, and one of them had just battered it around the head. And on his third wife, he'd cut her throat as well. Done it in such a way that matched that of Mary Jane, but also in the cases of his wife and 4 kids and his third wife, he'd buried all the bodies. There was an attempt to bury Mary Jane's body under the coal stock. So,
it does seem logical that it could have been Deeming. I mean, I know when I did a show on Melbourne Jail with Bill Taboni from the Australian Paranormal Society, and Deeming, obviously, he's quite a well-known figure there because of the fact he's also meant to have said that he was Jack the Ripper just before he died and all that kind of thing. I'm not sure about that one myself, but he definitely was a nasty piece of work, and supposedly, if from what I remember from that interview, people who say they've encountered him at Melbourne Jail say that he's still a nasty piece of work. And my sort of theory about him is that he was such a narcissistic psychopath that by talking about him gives him the energy and the attention that he wanted. At the end of the day, someone like Deeming, he wanted attention, and psychologically, and it makes I mean, it is plausible that maybe because he was meant to be a bit of a charmer as well with the ladies, wasn't he, Deeming? That's how he managed to get as many women as he did. And if you have quite a sort of a naive country girl of 18 who, in sort of 19th century, well, rural to a point, England, you know, at 18 you would be expected to start looking for a gentleman and looking for a partner of some sort to get married and all that kind of thing. So maybe she turned his advances down and that's what triggered it. But that does make sense. Yeah,
he was released from prison just a week before the murder, and the whole prison was literally for Mary Jane to get to Hull, she had to walk past Hull prison. So she was in that area. You know, when she was in Hull, she walked along Marketplace, and she walked along, and that was where Demon's solicitor was. Demon spent a lot of time in that area, so we do know that she passed areas where he was linked.
Oh, it's horrible. Poor girl. Well, the next one I want to talk about, and you've written a book on the Marfleet murder mystery, if anyone wants to read up more on it. I think all three of the murders we're talking about, Mike has written books about them. Well, I know he's definitely written on this next one because I've got it on my Kindle. But the next one is the one that I've said is, if you thought talking about being able to fit your fist into someone's throat when it's been cut is bad, this next one, for anyone especially anyone who's got children, will turn your stomach. This is the story of a young man called William Papper, and you can find photos of what he looked like back in the 1800s online, and he was this beautiful, fair-haired, very innocent, young-looking lad, very, good-looking, young, sweet-looking lad, and all the descriptions of him said he was a lovely young man, amiable, helpful, a genuine, nice kid. And he had been enrolled, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of these, he'd been enrolled on basically a live-in apprentice on a fishing boat called the Rising Sun. And a live-in apprentice basically meant that they lived with their employer all the time, not just when they were away at sea, because they would go away to sea for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And whilst we might think 14 getting an apprenticeship in 1881, 1880, that wasn't unusual to do that, because they left school at between 12 and 14 anyway. A 7-year apprenticeship on this fishing boat, working for someone called Osmond Otto Brand, who was actually from Stowmarket, which isn't 1,000,000 miles from where I am in Essex. Now, you probably worked out, anyone listening, that William died, but it wasn't that he just died. The circumstances of his death, it's horrific. It's horrific. So, I believe this was over the Christmas period in 1881, and he left Hull on the fishing boat. I think it was the 16th of December. 1881, is that right, Mike? I love it when I've done my research properly. And he's meant to have said, I mean, what I can't get with this one, and you'll understand why I can't get this, is the sheer hatred that his killer showed him on this fishing vessel. Now, one of the lines that they think, in the newspaper reports I've read from the time, that he's supposed to have said to his skipper, Brand, "Skipper, my sister says she knows you," which apparently annoyed Brand. Now, very soon as he got away to sea, Brand started, for want of a better word, torturing it. Do you want to take it from here, Mike?
Yeah, well, I mean, basically what happened was, there's kind of two lines of the story. The first official line is on January 6th, the whole packet, which was the local newspaper, published a report that he'd been lost at sea. William Papper had been knocked overboard. So basically what had happened was the crew had returned in January. Mr. Papa, William's dad, was waiting at the dockside to see his son, and the captain went over and said, "I'm really sorry, but he's been lost at sea. He's been washed overboard." So this was published in all the newspapers, and as far as anyone was aware, this was the official cause of death. It was quite unfortunate, and there'd been an accident on December 29, and he'd been lost around about 120 miles out off Spain Point in the North Sea. It wasn't until March that the full information was released to the public, because basically what happened was the crew on board that ship began to crack. They began to crumble. They began to talk about what had happened, what had really happened. And it led to the arrest of the crew, and then it led to the trial, and it transpired that Osmond Otto Brand and the crew had been involved in a sustained physical assault on poor little William. And this involved, they would do things like tie him up with a rope on deck, and while he was on the rope, they would throw buckets of water on him. They would fill up a barrel of water and put the barrel of water on the deck, and they would drop him into the barrel and leave him there in the barrel. But then they would pick him up and hang him again. So bearing in mind, this is over Christmas out on the North Sea, 120 miles from land. So it's going to be cold anyway. It's going to be freezing, you know. It's going to be hot. So that was one thing they did. They would tie him up in a bag and punch the bag. They'd hang the bag up and punch it. They would kick him. They would punch him in the face. At one point, they would feed his food would be fed to the dog. And anything the dog left would be then given to William. It'd be trashed. He wouldn't be allowed to go down to his cabin. He'd be kept on board the deck all the time. And the captain would constantly say to him, "This is because you said that about your sister and my wife." And there was just it was just a prolonged incident.
Attack.
There was bits where they'd throw buckets of water on him, and then they would refill the water and throw another bucket of water, and this went on for hours and hours on end. It wasn't just sort of one assault. This was a prolonged, sustained attack. There was bits where he tried to get up and he'd be pushed back to the floor and kicked and things like that. He would be hung from what was known as the cross trees, where he'd be stretched out. So almost like a crucifixion without the nails going in. He'd have his clothes ripped off him. He would be, just brutally beaten. And this went on for days and days and days, up to the point where William could take no more. And after this beating, he ended up falling asleep and never waking up again. And at that point, the skipper was told, William's dead. So he ordered for some sheeting and some sheeting to be wrapped around him, and they tied it up and weighted it down, and they threw him in the North Sea. And it was said that the boy was badly disfigured. His eyes were blackened, his face was disfigured. And it's said the crew were terrified because the captain carried a revolver. So they basically did what their captain told them. So this came to trial in full. This became public knowledge in full. And at that point, he was held in Hull prison while the trial was ongoing. So they had to take him to the police courts in Hull Centre, which takes quite some distance to get. So while that was happening, the public of Hull were obviously outraged. This was terrible. This was one of their sons, brothers, So every time the prison, the Black Maria or whatever you want to call it, every time the prison horse and cart took him into the cell, the courtroom, the people of Hull would gather at the roadside and they would throw stuff at the van in a bid to get to him, in a bid to try and hurt him. But obviously the poor prison officers were getting hit by bottles. And in the end they said, let's go to Leeds instead. So the trial was held in Leeds. And at that point, seeing how bad it was, little by little, the crew started turning against the skipper and blaming the skipper. And it was kind of, I think it was just self-preservation at that point. The skipper himself said he wasn't alone, that he kind of blamed the crew as well for participating in this behaviour.
Well, he blamed, was it the second
was,
hand, I think his name was Dench, and the third hand, whose name was Rycroft, he said they were just as complicit as him.
Oh, yeah.
And then you had the two young lads, as well as Papa, Blackburn and Yates, but Yates was the one that they didn't want him to find out that they'd managed to kill Papa, did they? Because they said, he's gonna tell on us.
He'll talk. So it got to the point then where little by little people started turning against the captain. And sure enough, it ended up with Osmond O'Brien facing a charge of murder, and Rycroft also facing a charge of murder. And it was such a bizarre case. Again, there was lots of twists and turns in it. It was very much like the Marfleet murder mystery in that respect, in terms of new evidence was coming to light all the time. People were coming out with stuff as to the character of these boys and the crew on board, and all the time poor William is getting forgotten almost. And eventually Brand was found guilty of murder. He was 27 at the time. He went to Armley Jail and he was hanged on the 23rd of May 1882. And if there's anyone out there that's interested in coincidences, Frederick Billy Demon that we talked about earlier.
On the
10 years
later.
May 1890.
I've just noticed that. Okay. That is a weird one. Do you think that Brand acted alone, or do you think the others that literally got? I mean, Rycroft got 3 months hard labour. That was it. I mean, that to me, that's not enough. But do you think they were all sort of bloodthirsty, or do you think they were literally so terrified of Brand? Had there been any other sort of accounts of Brand bullying his apprentices, or assaults, or nothing?
Up to that point, nothing like that at all. So it was, I mean, the way I see it, I think, the captain is the boss, and I think the kids are scared of what he might do. So I think they're just basically going along with the orders and carrying out what he wants. But yeah, I mean, they were there on board. They could have easily said, I don't think we can do it. No evidence of that going on.
No.
I mean, quite, in the aftermath of that, like you said, there was the rest of the guys got off. There was a minimal sentence handed down, and the Rising Sun sailed again. Actually, by the end of the court case, they turned around and said that Hull needed, and not just Hull, but the rest of the country, needed sweeping reform so that other fisher lads were looked after. So, but that was interesting that these other fisher lads would get protected. And it was almost like William he hadn't died for nothing. He
hadn't died in vain.
And then, quite interestingly, January of 1883, the Rising Sun is sailing from Hull, and it goes round End Point, which is where they sailed off, and it gets to a place called Dimblington, which is just north of Spain, and the Rising Sun ran aground and started sinking, and a rescue operation of the local lifeboats and all the other vessels in the area had gone to this stricken vessel. Everybody got off the ship apart from one boy, which was the young fisher lad who died. And so the ship itself had this kind of, by then had this notorious reputation. The whole fishermen were very superstitious.
Mariners are in general, though, aren't they? The mariners are possibly the most suspicious, I would say, people out there. So, was there talk then that the boat was cursed?
Oh yeah, at the time they called it the ill-fated fishing smack. And that Fred Lilly, who was just 16, so 2 years older, and he died, and he was lost out at Dimlington. But yeah, there was talk at the time that perhaps, and in the end, that because of the damage the vessel sustained, it was scuppered. There was no longer, I don't think anyone would have worked on it anyway, but
no.
Voyage, and that was it really. And the two sad sort of bookmarks for that is that when in Hull now we still have no memorial to little William. There's no plaque or grave or anything because he was lost at sea, which is a real shame. And then also little Fred Lilly as well. There's no memorial or gravestone for him. He was buried at Dimlington, which is a small village on the East Yorkshire coast. It's between Easington and a place called Out Newton. And today, it's been taken over by the gas family. And when they did that, they demolished all the church, and a lot of it fell into the sea through coastal erosion. So there's nothing there either. You know, when you go there, such a shame. You know, and it was a massive case. It was something that ended up in the Australian press. It ended up in the New Zealand press. People were talking about this all over the world. And then interestingly, Emma, who was William's sister, if you remember that William's sister was the throwaway comment that got William murdered. She was the one that supposedly knew Osmond Otto Brand. Again in 1883, a general dealer known as Patrick Quinlan had tried to murder her. You know, she was living with him at the time. They've got into an argument, and he tried to strangle her. And he managed to get out of bed and run from the house. And what was interesting about that is the press at the time mentioned her brother was William. You know, so it was almost like this was a case of there was a lot of bad luck and a lot of superstition and a lot of stories of kind of curses and all this kind of stuff. So coupled with the kind of the sort of folklore in the fishing community, it just gave me to the case, and I wanted to tell William's story.
Definitely. I mean, I think what got me about it, and not just, I mean, reading some of the newspaper reports from the time that had sort of, I suppose you could call them the witness statements from the other guys on the ship who was saying what was done to William and everything else. I mean, that was stomach churning enough. But to think that he came back into port on something like the 6th of January, and William's dad, Joseph, went on board, and he just said, I'm sorry, I've got some bad news to tell you. He fell overboard. And they shared a whiskey. And then all the crew kept lying to William's mum about what had happened, basically saying, yeah, he fell overboard, it was a horrible accident, blah, blah, blah. And then they find out that not only do they have to go through the grief, it's almost like going through the grief process all over again, because what they believe to have actually happened to their son isn't the truth, and they find out this person who was masquerading as their friend and considerate and everything else was actually the reason their son had died. And as you and I were saying, when you start to let your kids out into the big wide world, we were talking about this off air, you're nervous anyway, and to know that they actually arranged this apprenticeship for William, and the fact that they'd almost be this blame on themselves that they didn't realise that this Brand was a dangerous man. But what I find astounding is that there's no history of him ever having turned like that before. But also, he wrote a letter that just before, it was on him when he was hanged, I believe, at Armley, saying it wasn't me. I'm basically taking the blame for everyone else. So I almost wonder if the other sort of, what was it, 1, 2, 3, the other 4 of them all got together and said, look, we're going down for this as well, unless we can make it look like, no, who's going to contradict us? If we all have the same story as to what he did, nobody can contradict 4 against 1, that he's going down for this and we're okay. And the only person who's ever going to be able to tell the truth is poor William. And it really, I mean, if we haven't gone into loads of detail as to what happened to him, because we could do a whole hour on the Rising Sun episode and everything else. If you do want to read more, do get hold of a copy of Mike's book, because you go into an awful lot more detail on it in there. Now, we're not going to have a chance to talk about the last one we were going to talk about, which was Emma Starkey, because we've only got 5 minutes left, would you believe, Mr. C? But what I wanted to ask you is, when I was going through newspaper reports, literally I just Googled British newspaper, the newspaper's archive, Hull murders, 1800s,
Yep.
and there's a lot. There's a hell of a lot. It was almost like it was the Wild West.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think? What was? I know that at that point in time, you've got almost like the real crux of the Industrial Revolution kicking in. You've got the residents being, well, 10 times what they were at the early part of the 19th century in Hull. You've got, it's a massive port. It's got a huge fishing community. It's got the industry building as well. Why do you think it was almost dangerous to walk the streets?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was alcohol.
Right.
Played a big part. If you look at the old trade directories, the main thoroughfares in Hull, practically every 7th building was a pub or a club or somewhere that sold alcohol.
Like gin palaces and that kind of thing.
Yeah, things like that. Obviously, the docks attracted sailors from all over the world, prostitution, and I mean, a lot of it was people getting pregnant, and there was a lot of infanticide where they would get ready for babies, they would get the babies and dump them in the docks and things like that. That was going quite a lot. Most of the murders were kind of husband and wife affairs, where the man would just end up killing the wife for whatever reason. There were stories of women having babies and to bring them to term. He would come out quite healthily, and then the baby would be smothered or strangled or poisoned. And there was lots of those types of cases where, that were quite shocking. There was a number of murder-suicides. It was awful. I mean, it was just shocking when you read through. They estimated on average at least once a week they were pulling a child's body from the dock, round about the 1870s. I know 1871 to 1873 were bad years. And when they filled these docks in, there was a big sigh of relief from the dockmasters at the time, who said, "Thank God for that." They hated coming in the morning and getting the net, and going down and dragging the body out. And it became like a normal workday thing. It wasn't like, "Oh, look, there's a body." What the hell? It was like a modern. You go into work and you put kettle on, you make a brew, and then you go out and pick the body up, and it became routine, really. So that it was quite shocking. It was really. But there was so many, and a lot of it at that time. Hull was like a melting pot. Had all these different influences from all over the world. At one point, we had a little Italy, and we had a little Germany with all the Germans. We had Jewish, Polish, and Chinese. So there were all these different cultures all coming together in this really small town.
Yeah.
It just, you could see it simmering. And it continued to do so. I mean, the Victorian period was quite bad, but the murders continued like sort of the 20th century. And I mean, some of them are shocking, really are.
Well, that's our hour up, Mike. It's been fascinating as always talking to you. I know you and I normally end up gassing for about 3 or 4 hours when we start talking about this, but we only have an hour show to do. But thank you for everything you do with the history side and the telling people stories that can't be told themselves. I think, I mean, you and I have a mutual love for getting the facts out there, and it's why we sort of bonded in the first place. But thank you for doing that about a place that most people probably wouldn't realise has so much going for it. And I don't know if you'd agree with me on this, but what I would say is, look into your own hometowns, because you never know what's beneath the surface that has been covered up or has been mistold, I suppose you could say. There's always a story.
Yeah, definitely.
So what are you working on at the moment?
I'm working on a book about North Yorkshire ghosts. It's one of those books where I've heard a lot about ghost stories from North Yorkshire.
You're going across the border a bit. You're going from your part of the world up north a bit.
Yeah, I'm travelling a little bit. So, yeah, it's been great fun. These are places that I visit every year. So I thought, why not write about them? I'm always there.
North Yorkshire's one of my domains as well. It's one of my favourite parts of the world. North Yorkshire.
Whitby and York. Amazing.
Love it. Love North Yorkshire. I always say to my husband and I've said when the kids are grown up and left home, that's where we're retiring to. We're not going south. Can't really get much more south than where I am, really. We're going north, and we're going to move to North Yorkshire so that I can, I don't know, go to places like Pickering and Malton and Ripon and just live it up in North Yorkshire.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know you've got a lot of books also with your publisher waiting to come out, including the one that I wrote the foreword to for you. That's sort of getting ready to come out, I presume. You've also got the television show with Sky Crime Channel, which you said is on the 22nd? 22nd. Yep. Okay, we'll try and remind me, and we'll mention that again on our Parasearch page, even though officially our last day is this Friday, but we're not going anywhere. We're just not doing any new podcasts until the 6th of January. Well, thank you ever so much for your time. I do appreciate it. It was always a pleasure to chat to you, as you know, Mike. I do enjoy our conversations, and your level of research and knowledge is inspiring.
No, I enjoy doing it. I do.
I know. Well, we have to enjoy it, don't we? The amount of things that we dig into, and one of the things that we were saying is, when I was talking to him before about doing the research on like Pat Williams' case, you sometimes have to go into quite dark places to write about these things, and if you didn't really believe in what you were doing and the importance of it, you probably wouldn't.
No.
So, and if you don't know what I mean, get hold of a copy of the book, or even just go online and look at some of the newspaper reports about some of these cases, and you'll see exactly what we mean. But on that note, it's been a pleasure talking to you all this last year. I do hope you're going to stick with Parasearch for 2020. Merry Christmas to everyone who's listening. Hi James, sorry I didn't mention you coming into the chat room late. Where's the apple for the teacher? Thank you very much. But thank you everyone for listening to Haunted Histories and Parasearch over 2019. I do hope to catch you all in 2020. And on that note, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.